And then finally, we need to think about Aboriginal communities. You know, we're in Ontario right now, 2.5% of the population is Aboriginal. If you look at Western Canada, the largest growing sector of the population is Aboriginal. It's the skills base in Western Canada, and we need to figure out ways to make sure that, again, inclusion is understood as an economic necessity, not just a kind of liberal ethos, which is how we unfortunately tend to treat it in this country.
Wow. Great. You've got a fan. Yeah, I think it's important to touch on the Aboriginal nature of things. When you look at national digital strategies that have been done in other countries, the only one that actually really does address the Aboriginal issue is New Zealand. And that's another reason why, in many ways, they're a very interesting model for us, because they have 2 official spoken languages, unlike the other countries that have done national digital strategies. And we, of course, have 2 official spoken languages, but many, many languages in our cultures. Ian, your member organizations and directly through Interactive Ontario, your members are very involved in content creation, but traditionally it's, or essentially it's not the traditional content that's created by the film and television producers so much. It's online interactive content, et cetera. What are your thoughts about how that has to be factored into a national digital strategy?
Well, first, I'll do a little introduction just to who we are. My full-time job is President and CEO of Interactive Ontario, which is an industry trade organization that represents about 220 companies throughout Ontario, for a growing number in Ottawa, I'm very pleased to say. Our organization, like a number of others across Canada, sort of grew up working a lot with governments, with cultural development agencies and economic development agencies. And about 5 years ago, we saw the opportunity to collaborate through a crisis, which was a CRTC ruling, which basically cut back one of our major funding mechanisms, the Bell Broadcast and New Media Fund. And it incented us to come together and look at sharing a voice and putting forth a collaborative vision for the kind of Canada that we wanted to create and that we wanted to advocate for in the interactive digital media space. So we're doing, as Alan referred to, interactive digital media is sort of the scope of what we represent. So, mainly looking at things that are primarily interactive first and then on digital media platforms. The Canadian Interactive Alliance is that alliance of organizations. There's 7 organizations across Canada representing almost 1,000 companies in Canada. And its role is increasingly working sort of on the trade side and helping to market Canada and build a big brand, good brand for Canada, and certainly been very involved in the Canada Media Fund consultations that have been ongoing. So I think what we see as being really important, I think, is sort of that. It's making Canada a real destination and a real brand for creativity. It's creating a virtuous cycle, and I think what we need to have the infrastructure, that's for sure, and there's a lot of work that we need to do on the infrastructure side. But from an industrial standpoint, I think it comes down to talent and money. So you've got to be a magnet for talent. You've got to be a place where people want to come to find jobs, where they see opportunity, and where internally we're working very closely with the training institutions and the educational institutions to create the kind of talent that we need for now and for the next 5 and 10 years out. And we need the right triggers for access to capital. We need the kind of environment that is very friendly to investors. I think we have to look at opportunities of investment coming both from inside the country as well as from without. We need to have foreign capital. Canada just doesn't have enough competition in its capital markets to really sustain a very thriving economy around interactive digital media. So I think we have to be less afraid about inviting in the foreign capital. One thing that few people really know is that we're ultimately we punch way above our weight. We're very successful when it comes to the video game business. We are actually the third largest, community of creators in the video game business in the world. We employ upwards of 12,000 people in that business, and we generate about $2 billion of revenue a year. But it's kind of under the radar, and few people kind of know about it. And there's a couple of transnational companies that are driving a major portion of that revenue, namely Ubisoft and Electronic Arts. But those companies have also spun off a huge number of independent companies that are doing very well both in sort of the traditional marketplace, on the console platforms, as well as some of the new economies that are developing around the iPhone. So I think, it's really a people and money thing. It's a fairly simple thing in many ways, but gaining that reputation as being a great place to work and a great place to invest is very simply, I think, a huge driver and can be sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, a virtuous cycle, which will, I think, help propel all elements forward. And success builds upon success. And I think those are some of the critical things we need to work on. And if we can get some of those things right, the rest will start to take care of themselves.
Great. Yeah, I think the whole foreign investment restriction policies that we have are definitely going to be something that has to be considered as we try to compete globally. And perhaps the Global Live decision recently opened the doors a bit for that. We'll have to wait and see. But the interesting thing, of course, is that the jobs that you're talking about in the gaming industry are, occurring in the absence of foreign investment restrictions. And had we protectionist restrictions on our gaming companies, we wouldn't be having those jobs or those $2 billion of productivity, right? Yeah,
and the remarkable thing about the games industry is it's not a service-based business in the respect that the studios that are here generate their intellectual property here. It's Canadians that are creating it. It's Canadians that are developing it. There are people that want to come to Canada to work for those studios from all around the world. And it's really the money that's coming from the outside. And yeah, some of the major business decisions are made on the outside, and some of the tax revenues, are some of the money does flow outside the country, and it would be really great to build our own studios as well. But I think it's great that we weren't afraid and that there were no restrictions that prevented those companies from setting up shop, because they've created so many other companies that have also sort of grown up. Some of them have been acquired and spun off even further companies, and it just sort of grows and builds upon itself. So
it's interesting that if you look at the digital strategy that France has put together, one of their concerns is brain drain, and that's always been a Canadian concern, losing our best talent to the United States or elsewhere. France specifically identifies Canada as one of the countries that's a threat to them from a brain drain perspective, because people want to come and work in our video game industry in Canada. So it's nice to see for a change that we're putting the fear in other countries of something like that. And speaking of other countries, Adam, you've very patiently listened to us. So Adam, has his role with the British Screen Advisory Council, but he's also involved with Ofcom, which is the equivalent of our CRTC, and he's had involvement with the Digital Britain strategy. And when Digital Britain was released, it was met with mixed reactions, some skepticism, some downright contempt, some strong negative reactions to some of the financing schemes that were in it. So I guess first of all, I'd like to ask you, what did Digital Britain get right and what did it get wrong? And then from what you've heard from us so far, what are we getting right, what are we getting wrong, and what haven't we talked about that we should be talking about, and anything else you can share with us?